The Rough Drafts podcast is sponsored by Unicorn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Bet on your favorite games like CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends, and earn Unicoins through successful bets, or use Unicorn's exclusive Connect program, where you can earn Unicoins just by playing some of your favorite games. Use your earnings to enter Unicorn's raffles for exciting prizes like Logitech peripherals or CSGO skins. So join Chase and Walter and prove who really is the esports gambling expert. Unicorn.com. Log on today. Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another fantastic edition of the 2017 Spring Split Rough Drafts Guess the Line podcast, EU LCS, week 9 at this point. And folks, let's not forget, this is not the last week of the European LCS like it is in North America, because scheduling makes no sense. I am one of your co-hosts, Walter Ceades Fedczuk, and joining me, as always, my own scheduled debaser because he lives in Seattle, Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar. Chase, how does it feel being 3 hours behind the rest of the nation?
I mean, honestly, I do what I can. You know, I try to keep up. It's always great because I get to wake up and like half of the news cycle has already happened. So it's a lot of, I guess, catch up in the morning. That's how I found out about the Fnatic coaching move that they've now made, and we'll get into that later. So it's always fun to kind of get these things on the uptick. I'm just going to say, basically, you know, you mentioned scheduling. I think it's absolutely nuts that Riot chose not to flex some of these Week 8 matches that we had, because Week 8 was really fun. We saw some really interesting series. We learned a lot more, I think, about Unicorns of Love, H2K, Fnatic, Misfits. You know, there's a lot to digest. And that should have been Week 10, because now we have 2 weeks where, you know, this week, I don't think there's a single series that's really all that close. And I think that's kind of a concern if you're going to stretch the season to 10 weeks. You really want to have quality matches throughout rather than all concentrated 2 weeks before the season actually ends. So, you know, weird scheduling things, but at least now we get some fun games to talk about this time around.
Well, to be fair, you know, I don't think the EU LCS expected half of their league to be a dumpster fire. Because half of their league is a dumpster fire, and I guess we're going to get into our up for the week, and one of those teams is slowly sort of climbed their way to the top of that heaping pile of garbage, and has brushed themselves off, has looked outside the dumpster and gone, holy crap, there's sunlight out here. Oh my god, it's not all stinky, fiery misery. So Chase, go ahead, take your few minutes to gush about ROCCAT. Go ahead, I know it's coming.
Look, 2 weeks ago, I was on this podcast, and I begged ROCCAT, give me some sign, any sign that this plan is going somewhere, that improvements are happening, that players are getting better, that they're getting smarter, that we're drafting better, that we've shown that we've learned anything from the terrible split that we had for the first 6 weeks of the season. Since then, ROCCAT's 4-0, and obviously, a lot of that has to do with the quality of opponent. They've beat up on all of the teams that, as you said, it's kind of a dumpster fire in the bottom half of the standings. But you know what? In a world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And right now, that's where we are with ROCCAT. I really genuinely believe that I've got to go find some nice gift to give their new psychologist, like some chocolates or some flowers. I don't know what. But I feel like I have to do something, because it's night and day, not just in terms of how they're playing as, individuals. Faxi in particular looks so much more confident right now than he did at any point in the first 6 weeks. But also just their communication and synergy. They're roaming now in a way that they were. We didn't see any terrible tower dives over the last 2 weeks. We've been seeing pretty consistent play. We're seeing, Maxlor's continuing to be a catalyst for success. They've got 50.8% jungle control right now. Who would have said that about ROCCAT? How did we get to this point? Faxi went from a 2.0 KDA average on the season. He went 14, 10, and 28 this week. That's a huge leap forward. It's not perfect. They're not going to be an amazing team. They're not going to make the playoffs. They've got to play 2 teams that are clearly better than them at this point, and they lost enough in the first half of the season where it's kind of too little too late. But all I wanted was for them to show that they were improving, that they could stick around, and they're doing just that. And to me, that's got to be enough at some point. At some point, you have to say, well, we're avoiding relegations almost certainly at this point. We've made clear steps forward. And for people that, wonder why, the psychologist angle is being pushed as hard as it is, as a former head coach, I can tell you that the most important work that I ever did for my team was much more like a therapeutic effort than it was about any game knowledge that I added. Players are in the LCS for a reason. They were good enough to get there. They've played well enough as individuals and in team units previously most of the time to justify their LCS spot. What you need is a person who can bring the team together, who can get them to communicate, who can get players who have too big of egos to kind of step back and listen to the criticism being given, that players that would take that criticism personally and see it as I'm being attacked or they don't like me or I'm not good enough, and turn that into, it's not that you're not good enough, you can just be better, and I believe in you for that. Shifting that mentality is massive, and it's crucial for any team that wants to be successful. And there is a reason that every bad team that we point to, you hear the exact opposite from those stories. You get players that hate each other or don't communicate, or the coach isn't doing a good job of managing these personalities. So, you know what? I had a lot of negative things to say about ROCCAT for most of this season, but they are doing everything right now. They're probably going to go 0-2 over the next 2 weeks, and I don't care. They're going to be in the LCS. They're going to be in a better spot next split. Maybe, since ROCCAT showed they're willing to invest anything into this team by getting the psychologist and bringing them on board, maybe that means they'll invest in some new players in the mid-season split, and ROCCAT could actually make a run at a playoff spot. I would love to see it. I think it's in play. At the very least, I have hope. I have hope again, Walter. I have hope again.
You need to get your head out of the clouds there, mate. Listen, I'm not the biggest fan of sports psychologists, but there is always a honeymoon period where any kind of big change you make to a team effort or whatnot is going to have some positive results. So it's good to see that ROCCAT is on the up and up. They've played pretty damn well, actually, the last couple of weeks. And I think it's really been the bot lane that has absolutely pivoted the team's direction. I think Wadden and Hjarnan have been really exceptional, have really dominated some weaker opposition and even dominated Steelback, which was, if you were telling me that in 2017 Steelback would be losing the lane to Hjarnan, I would laugh in your face. But as for that sports psychologist, Chase, I have a gift recommendation for you. The ROCCAT Illumic double-sided mouse pad. According to their scientist at ROCCAT, Dr. Eric J. Dale, simply turning it around opens up unexpected new perspectives. So I would suggest getting him a mouse pad.
I don't know, man. There's kind of a thing about mouse pads being given out in esports.
That's the point. I'm making a joke that I don't think sports psychologists are actually worth it. Moving on, Chase. Was every up? There is a down. I think there's really only one team that kind of failed to live up to expectations this week, but I'll see if I agree with you. So, who did you think kind of missed the mark this week?
So, we've talked about the Fnatic system in the past. This is a team we have given the benefit of the doubt time and time again, because they're such a classic team, right? They're the old guard, season 1 world champions. Look at the ex-Peke era. Look at the Huni and Reignover era. Look at how good this team has been time and time again. And for the second time in as many splits, they're now going to lose their coach midseason. That is embarrassing. That is an embarrassing place to be if you are supposed to be this old guard. We are the picture of stability within the European esports scene. This is embarrassing. And it's embarrassing in a way that I don't see any upside on. Like, what is the benefit of getting rid of Nico the Pico right now? You could say, oh, well, he's a bad coach. And you know what? I agree with you. This team is clearly not working out. The personality traits seem to be coming head to head. Reckless looks absolutely miserable. Caps is, feeling less and less confident every day. Certainly he's playing like a less confident player every day because he keeps being put in these terrible spots. Their drafts are really bad. I understand every single one of those arguments. And guess what? Making your team manager the head coach doesn't fix that. What does a manager know about pick and ban? Why is there any reason to believe that anyone who is working alongside Nico the Pico is suddenly going to have this air of quality and understanding and bring in this new look that's going to change things around? There's no upside here. All you're doing is changing this factor that, who knows? Maybe it was really getting this bad. Maybe there were a whole bunch of fights behind the scenes and it was an untenable situation. But what I'm seeing right now is we have a manager, not a coach, not an analyst, a manager who is now being forced to step in with 2 weeks left in the season and is basically tasked, hey, fix everything right before the playoffs. It's an impossible task. There's no way that he's going to have, I don't even know if he's capable of creating a new system because I'm not sure how much this manager actually knows about the game itself. But even if he could, how are you going to do it in a couple of weeks? What are you going to be able to change when the only examples you have of how to run pick and ban were all really bad? And this isn't a situation like we had last time where at least people looked at Nico the Pico and said, well, he's been working under Daylor. He gets it. Daylor created a system. Now we just have someone who can replicate that effect. Now, if anything, we're replicating Nico the Pico. That's a much worse place to be. It makes no sense. It's a perfect sign of a team that is panicking and looking to do just about anything to either give them a good PR spin or we need change because change is something that we're nominally going to say is good without considering what we're changing to. And if I'm Fnatic, I'm just looking at all of this and saying, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we pushed away one of the best coaches that the EU LCS has ever seen with the way that supposedly Fabiven was handling things behind the scenes and some other personalities that really didn't seem to get along with the plan? How did we look at that and say, you know what? Let's get another mid laner with an ego. Let's keep this analyst who hasn't really shown any strong coaching tendencies. And now let's just throw a manager in there, because why not?
Hey, it worked incredibly well for Origin. Let's not, come on. It worked so well for Origin when they did it. Listen,
boy.
I actually was gonna go with Misfits, but in all reality, it's true. I think the Fnatic system has been dead, and we've been overvaluing it since the loss of Daylor. In all honesty, I think the organization as a whole, across the board, going into their Counter-Strike team, going into Overwatch, just across the board, has made some very questionable decisions over the past probably year, 6 months, year and a half, and it's really starting to show that this is going into a dark place. This organization is going into a dark place. It's not going to have the kind of relevancy, and especially in a region like Europe where the new teams, when they show up, when they enter the scene, we've seen with Splice, we've seen with G2, we now are seeing with Misfits, we saw it with Origin for a couple splits. Legacy orgs don't really matter anymore in Europe. And Europe, Fnatic, it took bringing in a set of Koreans and Huni and Reignover to really maintain their relevancy. But ever since then, ever since the loss of Peke and Ceades the first time, this team has just slowly begun to lose its reputation in Europe and its relevancy. And I think that next split is going to be, one of those final death knells. It's not going to kill it. I don't think they're, going to get relegated. I'm not going to say that without seeing the rosters for next split. But after spring, I don't look at this organization with any pride anymore. I don't think they're the San Antonio Spurs of the LCS anymore. It's not there. They're probably more like the Knicks.
What
the
they
Knicks
are
at this point?
They're SK Gaming. Do you remember when SK Gaming was this old
See,
guard org that we had a ton of respect for?
I didn't want to
And then
say
they made
it
to
but
Worlds. They had an underwhelming playoff split, and then we're suddenly out of the league. Like, we've seen this arc before, and Fnatic, you have one shot this offseason to change that course. And if you make the decisions the way you've been making them for the past year and a half, as you said across a lot of their titles, well, SK could use some friends, I suppose. Good on you guys. Good luck.
Well, we could use some friends over in Europe. We went 1-1 in our smart money picks last week. We missed on Orion winning any game against Vitality and making it go to 3 maps. But we did hit on Fnatic versus ROCCAT going to 3 maps, and that was plus 130, which means that we gained money last week. That puts us at minus 215 in Europe, which I know it's like, all right, guys, like, you're supposed to be esports gambling experts, but we're still in the black overall between both regions.
Yes.
So that brings us to the very first match. Oh, and Chase and I are tied in our challenge. We're at 8-8, and I crushed him last week. It was a dominating victory.
It was not great. One
of the most dominating victories in presidential election history. It was just fantastic. It was just incredible. Great groundwork. Great grassroots effort on my part and my gambling predictions. And now we come into this week. We've got 3 more guesses for the regular season. Week 9 in Europe, Week 9 in NA, and Week 10 in Europe, because once again, the world doesn't make sense. So Chase, we're going to start off Week 9 in Europe, the penultimate week in Europe, with Vitality versus Splice. Both teams are in differing, kind of in the same spot that they've been all season. Vitality's been kind of slumping, hasn't been performing very well. They did get the victory last week over Orion, which is helpful. But, they haven't been doing anything great. And Splice has sort of been the opposite of, like, they do pretty well. They're beating all the bad teams. They're being plucky against the upper echelon. Is there any cause for concern here for Splice? Do we think at all Vitality might take a game off of them, might take the series?
I mean, honestly, I'm feeling the exact opposite of concern for Splice. I'm excited about this team right now because the meta is finally in their favor. Look, no team gives more of their gold to their top lane than Splice, which when you're playing in a tank meta is really not that ideal because it's very hard for a tank to hard carry a game. You can initiate fights really well, but you need, in the meta we were in before, you needed your jungler and your mid laner to make big plays, and Trashy's terrible at carry junglers, and Senkux was struggling on those previous picks. Now, the top lane carries are in play. Wonder's Fizz was amazing. That was so much fun to watch. I mean, in Game 1 in particular, just the way in which he just knew, like, okay, I've got enough damage. I can just E in, get the kill, get out, no problem whatsoever. He's got such a good command on that champion. He's got such a good command on so many different carry top lane champions. This is playing perfectly into what he wants to do. And meanwhile, we're starting to see more tanky utility junglers like Gragas and Rek'Sai come back into the meta. Guess what? Trashy loves Gragas. It's like his favorite thing to play. He's rather good at it, in fact. So Trashy went from being this liability in a lot of ways to now being a very crucial part of this 1-3-1 split push style that Splice has been waiting for ever since the Riot forced standard lanes before Worlds last year. This is where Splice wants to be. They want to have the ability for Kabi and Mickey to be carry guys. Let Kabi, who is right now one of the biggest playmakers in the support position behind Ignar, let him be that guy in the bot lane. Let your solo lanes relieve some pressure in that end. It's just playing to their favor. And now whether that's going to be enough against a really good team, we have yet to see. Beating Origin doesn't do enough for me. That's not enough of a sample size. And beating Vitality isn't necessarily going to do that for me either. Let's face it, beating up Origin is good for morale for Vitality, but I don't think Nuke Duck's going to look as good here as he did last week. I think that's not what they do.
Yeah.
They have a terrible amount of objective control. Their dragon percentage right now, 22%. It's almost half of what the next lowest total is in the EU LCS, I should say, right now. So there are a lot of problems with Vitality that I think Splyce is going to be able to exploit. They're going to have to prove that they can do it against H2K and the Unicorns of Love, and that has yet to be seen. But they have a much better chance now than they did in the previous meta. 7.5 is everything coming together and moving in Splyce's direction.
Well, it gets better, because on 7.6, apparently, there's Gnar buffs.
Right, we're buffing Gnar? I haven't actually...
Trust me, that was Sakura's reaction, too, of why are we buffing Gnar? Why are we buffing Gnar? And if there's a champion that Wonder likes to play, it's Gnar.
It's Gnar.
It's Gnar.
Well, I mean, to be honest, that probably is a nerf then, because it means that Gnar is just going to be permabanned. But, I mean...
Maybe? I
okay.
Guess so, maybe?
Look, good for Splyce that they're finally in a meta in which they're comfortable. I still have concerns that they are so meta-dependent, but, I mean, I'm assuming the playoffs are going to be locked into either 7.6 or 7.7, and in the direction the game is going, they're going to be in a pretty good spot. And I like them to make an improvement moving forward. This game, I don't think is going to be particularly close. I have Splyce minus 600.
I have Splyce minus 550. The actual line is Splyce minus 666. Vitality is at plus 400. And this is going to be given a trend for the week, folks, of there are no really good lines. Chase and I already discussed this, so we're going to look at potentially going to either being 2-0s or 3 maps. 2-0, no value here in this game, but to go to 3 maps, it is plus 155. I don't think that's very likely. Splyce is coming off of a very dominating performance against Origin, a pretty plucky performance against G2, and Vitality lost to ROCCAT. So let's not forget that. Moving on, G2 versus Giants. Anything we want to say about either of these teams other than apologizing to Lozark and the rest of Giants for the beating they're about to receive?
I just want to point out a couple quick numbers that I thought were particularly impressive. Assuming that G2 wins this series, they will have gone 400 days between the last time they lost. It will have been 400 days since the last time they lost the series, which is absolutely nuts. And you know, obviously the fact that best of twos happened made that streak a lot easier to hold, but still, this is a team that has been atop the LCS standings for a very, very long time, to the point where I think you can make a very good case that it's a testament to the stagnation of the EU scene as a whole. There were definitely some positive things that I saw this week. Sven averaged a 99 CS, averaged 99 CS at 10 minutes. That's bonkers. I don't really have anything to say other than that's nuts, and I don't really know how we got to that point.
Considering like CS at 10 minutes is like 106, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem. Wait, what did you thought it was?
Perfect
106?
CS.
Perfect CS is 106. Yeah, it's absurd. It's absolutely bonkers. Meanwhile, you look at jungle control. Walter, just without looking, how much jungle control do you think G2 has? They do have the 2-time MVP in their jungle, so what do you think would be a good number, right?
58%.
Okay, 58 would be literally record-breaking. This is 56.8%.
Oh, okay.
Which is still absolutely bonkers. I think the next closest team is somewhere like 52%. Like, this is absolutely insane. These games are not necessarily even as close as they would indicate. It never really felt like Misfits were going to win the series, even when they were able to take that game too, just because they were so reliant on a snowball. And G2 have shown they can snowball games, sure, but they can also just hold out the early game and then just beat you by starving you of resources and forcing you to take disadvantageous fights. And that's exactly what having a guy like Trick allows you to do. So I'm very high on G2. I think that Giants is a disaster area. Flaxish is making a very good case for worst EU top laner, 1.7 KDA, negative 8.5 CS differential at 10 minutes, and a whole 319 damage per minute. Way to go, dude. That's I don't know what to say other than this has been a split from hell for Giants, and G2 is just going to keep on reaping the rewards of an EU scene that hasn't found a way to deal with their strategies yet.
Yeah, I have nothing to say. Where do you think the line is?
I have G2 minus 2,000.
I also had G2 minus 2,000. Shockingly, it is G2 minus 1,250. That puts Giants at plus 600.
Wait. So just to be clear, last week, Splice was minus 1,250 favorites over Origin. Yes. And I think G2 has a higher chance of winning this series. That line seems low to me.
The theory is that G2 is as good as there's the same gap between G2 and Giants as there was between Splice and Origin, which
I disagree with. Like that, I think that Giants team is really terrible. That's fair. A terrible team.
That's fair. There's no value in a 2-0, and 3 maps is at plus 195. No, it's not going to happen. We're just going to keep on trucking along because we're going to have a lot of no's on this podcast, folks, unfortunately. ROCCAT versus Misfits.
Yep.
Misfits was, until the Nico the Pico news, Misfits was kind of my down for the week just because they looked so inept against G2. They couldn't exert their type of gameplay, and I just think this is the story of G2, is that G2 just knows how to play against every European team, and that it just is what it is. But it's kind of disappointing that Misfits, they put up a fight, but it wasn't as much of a fight as I wanted. I didn't think Game 3 was as close as it should have been. So, yeah. Chase, you're the ROCCAT fan. You kind of need this victory. How does ROCCAT beat Misfits?
I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to weather the early game storm. And that is the most important thing to do against Misfits. It is also the toughest thing to do against Misfits. Misfits right now has the highest early game rating of any team in Europe, and it's not particularly close at this point. The onslaught is just really tough to deal with. Kakao has been playing out of his mind. Say what you will about the way the series went, and Game 3 in particular, but that kick he had was one of the greatest plays I've seen in a while. He's one of the best Lee Sin players in Europe, if not the best Lee Sin player in Europe. His Graves is great. He's going to be able to hold his own very well. And I think that helps. I think the Alphari in a carry top meta in which he can get CS leads for himself, I think that helps. I think that Hans Sama now being able to go on more AD carries should be a positive in the long run for them.
His Lucian is going to just...
It's so good. It's a really good champion for him.
Ooh, oh boy.
I was less impressed by the Callista necessarily, but, I thought that side of things was great. And I think that's where the meta's moving. So I think the first thing you have to do is just survive that. Right. Survive that. Don't let Power of Evil roam on you, because that's what Power of Evil is going to want to do when he's playing in the right place. The second thing I would say is exactly, is directly related to that, which is you can mess with Misfits and pick and ban. Mm-hmm. Misfits has a clear style of play. They want to roam with Power of Evil. So cut off some of these assassins that he would want to play. Like, use your bans on that end and limit the ability for him to really come down on him. You can put Alphari in a position where it's harder for him to have the carry tops that he wants. You can put Hans Sama in a disadvantageous bot lane. This can be done. It's not easy, but you can absolutely do it if your champion pools are deep enough. The problem I have for ROCCAT is I don't think their champion pools are particularly deep enough to do that. But the fact that G2 forced Power of Evil onto these Orianna and Victor picks, which he was fine with, he wasn't bad on those champions, but it wasn't the way that Misfits likes to play the early game. I think that helps. The big thing is that when the mid to late game team fights start, this is where we start seeing problems with Misfits. Their positioning is not always ideal in that regard. They don't necessarily do a great job setting up fights because so much of their vision game is based on them being able to move so freely around the map. So theoretically, these are the places where I could see someone trying to attack them. Unfortunately, I don't see how ROCCAT survive the early game, let alone do any pick and ban shenanigans or get their way into forcing some advantageous fights.
You're looking at the wrong players. That's the problem that you're having as a ROCCAT fan. You're looking at the solo lanes, which you're not going to ban them out. I think it's absolutely foolish to attempt to go after Power of Evil or Alphari's champion pool. You need to go after Ignar, and you need to go after Cacaw's champion pools. Especially,
I don't agree with that at all.
Especially with a transition to some tankier style junglers. Like, you can't let Ignar have Malzahar. You can't let him have Zyra. He's just allowed to. There's too much playmaking potential. I'd much rather have Ignar.
Tahm Kench is really good too. Like, you're not going to be able to spend that many bans on Ignar. And even when you do, okay, well, he's going to play his Thresh, and his Thresh was pretty good. Or he's going to play Lulu, and his Lulu is pretty good. Like, what's your plan there if you're trying to attack their bot lane?
The thing isn't attacking the bot lane. The thing is trying to limit their playmakers. And in all honesty, yes, Power of Evil on Assassins will roam, and he'll get kills. But the playmakers over the past 3 or 4 weeks are not Power of Evil and Alphari. They are Cacao and they are Ignar. They are Ignar flashing in and hitting a Maul's ultimate. They are him flashing in and hitting Zyra roots. I get you can't ban out entire people's champion pools. And yes, Ignar can play Tahm Kench. He can play Thresh. He could bring out something weird like Taric or play Lulu or go to Nami or any of these things. But it's about minimizing the ability for them to make plays. Ignar probably isn't the better option to go after, so I'm going to say Cacao. Get him off the Lee Sin. Get him off the Rengar. Get him onto something like, get him off Graves. Get him onto something like a Gragas or a Rek'Sai. Put him on Kha'Zix even, because Kha'Zix, out of those 4 champions, is the more risky champion to play because it's squishier. He doesn't have the upfront burst that a Graves has where he comes in, boom, blows you up, and you're at a quarter health and you have to run away. He's a little bit more nuanced type of champion. And Cacao, when you look at the early season when Misfits was playing okay, but they weren't beating Unicorns of Love type play, it was because Cacao was having issues. Cacao wasn't playing very well. And then about week 3, when he started playing Lee Sin a little bit more and started making all these plays and really getting into his lanes and going after the enemy jungle in their jungle, that was when Misfits started to have this run where all of a sudden they were playing very well and they were on our up list, it seemed like, every single week. Yeah. Power of Evil is a solid Syndra and a solid Orianna player, and he can still have that roaming presence that he does on any Assassins. I don't think banning out LeBlanc and Ahri is going to do anything. He's going to build a Morellonomicon anyways, which is going directly against what Betsy is good at, which is scaling, health stacking, regenerating mid laners like Swain and Vladimir. Like, I just think you're looking in the wrong place to get an edge. Ignar gets caught out. So if you get him on something that isn't as capable of making plays, that he's still going to try and force them, like, he gets caught out on Tahm Kench, and you can kill a Tahm Kench. If Tahm Kench is by himself, there isn't a whole ton he can do. But ROCCAT's plan has got to be very, very solid warning so they can catch out the jungler and the support when they do come in to ward or to make plays and to try and limit their playmaking potential. I just think going after Power of Evil and Alphari is kind of silly.
Well, I think that, just to clarify, I don't think you're going to be able to ban the champion pools of anybody. Even if you go after Cacao, guess what? His Rek'Sai is really good, his Elise is really good. His Graves is really good, and you're not spending a ban on Graves. So I don't think that you can ban out any of these players. I think that's just not going to work out very well for you. But what I do think is that so much of their early game potential comes in their ability to open up the map. And when you give Power of Evil these roaming assassin style champions, it becomes so much easier for him to do it. It becomes so much more advantageous for him to make these roams, to do these dives under the bot tower, which is what they love to do. And they're absolutely going to try to pick on Hjarnan and Wadid here, and they're going to have him roam down to that bot lane. And what's going to be the deciding factor here is how quickly can he get there? How efficiently can they take that guy out? And can ROCCAT make a play on the other side of the map? I think that's a lot easier to do when you're playing against a Victor than it is against an Ahri or a Talon or any of those other.
I just don't think Misfits are gonna pick Victor anymore.
Look, honestly, the problem is that whatever Misfits does, ROCCAT doesn't have the tools to deal with it. I think that the key, if you're trying to beat Misfits, it's not force them onto champions that they're not as comfortable on. It's attack the play style. Force Misfits to play things that need time to scale because they haven't shown they can do that very well. Don't let them have these early game heavy characters. That's what they do well. I think that those are the points that I would attack. You can argue over which individual players are the best way to do that. I personally think that Kakao has more than enough answers, and I think that the bot lane's going to do what the bot lane always does, regardless of who Ignar plays. I think that it's limiting the roaming potential of that mid lane, either by really, settling Kakao on something that needs to scale up, and like I said, good luck with that, or you need to limit the champions of Power of Evil are, so at least there's an opportunity cost. If he wants to roam down to the bot lane on a Victor or a Syndra or whatever else it is, ROCCAT can attack a mid lane tower and open up the map more for them so that they can get their vision down and they can keep the game going long enough to hopefully either outscale or take advantage of some of the mispositioning in team fights or overextensions when they try to make mid to late game plays that have hit Misfits. Again, I don't think this is going to happen. I think Misfits is a superior team in just about every way, and I had them as minus 450 favorites.
Well, you're a dick, because I had them at minus 400, and it's minus 434. ROCCAT at plus 290, so you get another point because your mass was slightly closer than my mass. Again, I agree. I don't necessarily think ROCCAT are going to win this series. Which makes the last game that we're going to talk about that much more important for ROCCAT's potential playoff chances. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because I don't want to talk about either of our next matches. That's Unicorns of Love versus Orion. Unicorns of Love looked really good last week. They really kind of took it to H2K.
Starting to embrace the rainbow again a little bit more. I do think there's a rock, paper, scissors nature to the 2 through 4 seeds right now. Misfits clearly forced Unicorns of Love into a lot of disadvantageous situations, whereas Unicorns of Love have showed that they can handle H2K's early game and force them into making fights that really didn't go well for H2K. Game 1 was as efficient a game as you could hope for, and Game 2, Unicorns of Love playing well behind is not something that we necessarily have a lot of experience seeing this split. So it was very nice to see them do it and do it against a great team. And if you're wondering how they're able to do this and why they were able to neutralize such a great early game from H2K, it's because the one thing that most teams that H2K has that they like to exploit don't have a 50.9% lane efficiency rate. That is the amount of creeps that they are able to grab compared to their opponents, what the advantage that they're going to get in that regard. They wave clear really well all the time, regardless of their champion pool. They are the best wave management team, which means they will always be able to split push, and H2K didn't necessarily like split pushing. You know what Origin doesn't like? Any strategy whatsoever. And so I think that this is going to be a blowout. I have it at Unicorns of Love minus 1,500.
Yep. With that, you're gonna take the week from me here because I said Unicorns of Love minus 1,000 because I thought it'd be silly for it to be any higher line than G2. But it's Unicorns of Love minus 2,500.
There we go.
So
that's Origin plus what?
Plus 850.
Okay.
Nope. No, thank you. Nope. Not gonna happen. Oh, we missed out. 3 maps for Misfits versus ROCCAT is at plus 130.
I was about to ask you about that.
Kind of interesting. Plus 3 for 3 maps in this game, in this series, plus 240. Not gonna happen. No. Lol. Orion in 2017. Moving on to the last 2 games of the night, the week. H2K versus Vitality. Even with the 2-0 loss to Unicorns of Love, I just think it's a playstyle thing. We've talked about it before. H2K is extremely bad, I think, at wave control and management and split pushing, and they don't do very well when they have to make a ton of quick rotations all around the map and have to cover, okay, well, bot tower is about to be destroyed, and they're pressuring Dragon, and there's a wave that's about to hit our top inner tower. Like, when they have all those type of macro decisions to make, they aren't very good at, like, creating a plan and sticking with it. They kind of get razzled. So lost to Unicorns of Love. They're still in the playoffs. This probably means they'll be up against the 3 seed out of
they'll play Fnatic, and it's as good as a first round bye as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Fabiven's poor positioning was a huge problem in game 2. His ults were really bad. They opened up the door for a Unicorns of Love comeback that never should have happened. But let's not panic here. H2K has a 66.2 early game rating. That is the highest in the league, even higher than Misfits, and Misfits was already higher than most teams across the world. Both of them are higher than, for example, KT Rolster, who has the highest early game rating in Korea. So just think about the gap between H2K and Misfits and the rest of Europe when it comes to how they handle it. And the biggest reason for that, Jankos, 104 kills coming out of the jungle. The next closest is Trick at 81. That's absurd. They are first tower percentage and first 3 tower percentages are the highest in the league, 84% and 78% respectively.
Go back to the kills thing. You aren't even talking about the most impressive thing, which is Jankos is third, period, among all players with 104 kills.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
He's sitting in between, like, 6 mid laners. Like, that's the more impressive thing. It's not just that he's ahead of all the junglers, it's that he's also top 3 in terms of everyone.
Well, it's that he's so far ahead of the junglers. It's that there isn't a jungler who is close. And I understand his first blood rate hasn't been as high as it has been in recent years. He's not the first blood king anymore. Surprisingly, that's Joko. So, I'm not sure maybe first blood king is all that relevant anymore, but I'll take kill crazy, enabling teammates to rotate and take towers more efficiently than anyone else in the league. Biggest problem is going to be teamfight coordination. Nuclear and Che for a while were carrying him in those fights because teams didn't have a great way to deal with those engages. But now teams, the meta's changing a bit. Nuclear and Che aren't necessarily, as dominant as they were at the beginning of the season. It seems like now it's much more focused on H2K solo lanes. Odoamne looks better. Struggle a little bit against Fedczuk, but almost everyone will. Fedczuk's at this point my pick for all-pro first team top laner. So I don't hold that against him necessarily. If they can have both of their solo laners on point at the same time, this is a team that will be a title contender. The problem is that we just haven't seen that very often. It seems like either Odoamne or Fabivin is doing well in any particular game, not both. So I'll be very interested to see if they can snowball both of those lanes and kind of have a more balanced approach. Against Vitality is a great time to try some things out and see how it works, because that's not going to be a particularly close series, a phrase that we've said far too often on this podcast. I have H2K minus 800.
Yep, the beating just continues. This is payback for me crushing you in NA last week. I said H2K minus 750. It's H2K minus 909. That puts Vitality at plus 500.
Yep. Okay.
3 maps is plus 175. Okay. I'm not feeling good about that one either.
It's hard to see, but at the same time, we're running out of options, so we might have to come back to that one.
So, Fnatic versus Giants.
Yes.
Last game of the week. This is incredibly important for ROCCAT if they want to make the playoffs. Because if they lose to Misfits, they need Fnatic to also lose some other games here and there. Fnatic, obviously, disheveled by potential roster changes, but let's not forget the wise man of Ceades once said, coaches are useless. Let's not forget that. That once was a Twitter battle where Ceades didn't think that coaches were worth anything. So
those are the days.
Fnatic doesn't really have a coach. So there you go, Ceades. It's time for you to shine, which is something you haven't done at all through the course of the split. So Chase, in order to keep ROCCAT's hopes and dreams alive, what do Giants need to do to beat Fnatic?
Can they sign a roster of 5 different players before the week starts? Because that would help. Unfortunately, I think the roster lock is in. I mean, this Giants team.
That's kind of rude, I think. That's kind of rude. There's been a couple players on here that you've spoken nicely about.
Okay, I will say we have 2 players that absolutely deserve credit there, and these 2 players, that was an unfair joke. Memento and Knight. Knight, now that he's back in an Assassin meta, looks really good. 13, 5, and 9 last week. He can still be that roaming Assassin player that tries to snowball things for his team. He could still be that guy. We've seen that now. Didn't work in the previous meta, but in 7.4 and beyond, he's looking significantly better. Memento is someone who, if this team was, particularly good, he might be in a conversation for, some of these all-pro jungle positions. His numbers are surprisingly solid. You're looking at you know, a very high kill participation from him right now, a highest among all junglers at 74.1%. His first blood rate is 52%, which is the second highest in the league. He's got, you know, gold advantages. He's got he's actually doing more damage per minute than any junglers other than Jankos and Trick, which is pretty impressive. So certainly those two players are doing decent things. The problem is that this team as a whole has no idea what to do with these micro advantages. They don't turn kills into objectives. In fact, they're probably the worst objective team in the league other than Origin. The numbers just show a team that has no idea how to claim things like Dragon or Baron, or, you know, their lane efficiency is really subpar, 48.8%. That is the second lowest in the league. Only Origin is worse. It's a problem. This is a team that does not coordinate at all. They do not roam for lanes. They do not take down towers. They do not make cross-map plays. You have two guys who have great solo efforts that are trying to carry this team, and the weight is just far too heavy. Hiku is not necessarily an LCS caliber AD carry. He's really struggling. And I already said Flaxish is possibly the worst top laner in the entire EU LCS. You know, sorry for guys that were excited about him, Walter. I know you were very high on all these EU top lane rookies, and I said at the beginning I thought Alfari was going to be the best, and I thought the rest were going to be bad, and I'm 100% right. I feel vindicated on that front. This Flaxish is really, really bad. So I mean, no, they don't need 5 new players per se, but at the very least, they need players who can actually communicate together, make cohesive plays, make cross-map plays, actually take down towers and objectives, and that's not happening with this roster as it is currently built. They're terrible at basically everything you would want from an objective perspective, and that leaves Fnatic in this place where if you were ever going to get away with, you know, not having a real coach this week, this is the time you'd want to do it, right? This is the time in which you have the opportunity to make some mistakes, and your pick and ban doesn't have to be all that sharp. Not that it was all that sharp with Nico the Pico anyway, but still, you know, you can get away with some things here. I think that as much as they've struggled in recent, you know, in the last couple of weeks, I think Broxa looked okay last week. I didn't think he looked great, but I think he's starting to figure out some things here and there, still making some very clear rookie mistakes. I think they moved him up too quickly, but, you know, it's too late to fix that now. You certainly can't move him back without killing his confidence. And so now you've just got to make the most of it, and it seems like they're starting to. Ceades is a problem. I think Caps is not necessarily working out the way that they would hope. They're certainly not playing around them the way that you'd like. They need a win here, and I think they're going to get it. And I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep guys like Reckless on board, but that's just what they're going to have to do. If you can't beat Giants convincingly, it's going to be a problem.
It's definitely not enough to keep Reckless on board. There's almost no way that Reckless is on Fnatic next split with this roster. It would need to have a drastic roster change, and in between spring and summer, it's very difficult to actually build a consistent, stable roster. It's difficult.
And the problem is that Reckless isn't a guy that's worth building a team around on his own. No offense to Reckless. He's a good player. If he's your number 2 guy, you're going to be doing pretty well. If he's your number 3 guy, you're probably one of the best teams in the region.
Yeah.
But as a number 1 guy, I don't know how far you get with that. Certainly we learned from Alliance that having him as a number 1 guy is not something that has historically worked out all that well. So, unfortunately, I don't think Fnatic can even do well if they made him that Godfather offer of please stay and you can kind of form the team in your image. I don't think that's going to be the plan that will lead to Fnatic success either. So, they're in a weird spot. I think they're still in a much better spot than Giants. So, you know, I still have Fnatic winning this series. I have it as -280.
Well, I had Fnatic -300. You're gonna get this one. You just absolutely crushed me this week. It's not even that. It's not even close. Giants are at +165. 3 maps is at +105. And Chase, this puts us in a
Wait, what was Fnatic?
-222 for Fnatic.
Okay.
-222. So this puts us in a really weird spot where Chase, the gambler in me, is saying, stay away from this week. There is
Right.
no value.
What are the odds that Fnatic gets a 2-0 over Giants?
+145.
Okay.
I don't feel confident in that at all.
when was the last time Giants won a map?
Giants won.
It's been several.
map.
I mean, they beat Vitality.
They had a 1-map win against Vitality, and they beat Origin last week. They won 3 maps last week.
Well, 2 weeks ago, you mean?
Or yeah, week 7. Sorry, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I mean,
Fnatic,
when you get 2-0'd by ROCCAT,
they lost the game the first time they met Giants.
yes.
So I don't feel confident in a 2-0 at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think there might be at least more value on that than some of these other bets. I mean, we have to come up with 2. That's the rules we set out for this podcast.
There's no value here. There's none. Zip.
I understand
Nada.
that.
Zilch.
I understand.
Zilch.
But look, Walter, is this we make responsible bets and choose not to make any decisions this week?
We call them smart money. There is no smart money here.
Yes, but the people, look, we got to give the people what they want. People want gambling advice, and we're scared off by this.
My gambling advice is don't gamble on this week. That is my expert level advice. Is there's no value here. The only one that I feel even remotely comfortable with is 3 maps for Giants and Fnatic. That's the only one I feel remotely comfortable with.
What's 3 maps for Giants and Fnatic?
Plus 105, and it's very little value. That's the only that's the only thing I feel comfortable with. The crazy gambler in me is almost saying, Fnatic has no coach.
ROCCAT could take a map, right?
Against Misfits?
They just have to weather the storm once.
Okay,
let's do
those 2. 3 maps for ROCCAT versus Misfits. That is at plus 130, and 3 maps for Giants versus Fnatic. That's plus 105.
Okay.
And Chase is forcing me to pick 2. I don't feel like any of these things are going to happen.
Let me be clear. This is a terrible week of games. We could have 6 2-0s, and it wouldn't make me blink an eye. I swear there's no value here. If you're not running an esports gambling podcast sponsored by thelovelyunicorn.com, you shouldn't bet on this week. It's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Save up for NA and have, make like 5 NA bets. This is going to be an exciting week in the North American LCS. There's so many fun storylines on the line. You're going to have so much more fun watching those games and following those bets and seeing how those turn out. Do yourself a favor and just do it. Just trust me on this. You don't want to gamble on Europe. We're insane for doing it, but, this is what we get for running a podcast. So here we are.
I tried to tell you to stay away. Chase said I couldn't. So
yeah.
I blame everything on Chase. Next
we're
week,
still telling you to stay away.
Next week, when we miss both bets, it's going to be all on Chase. So.
Sure.
With that, Chase, you take the lead in our little competition. You're up 9-8 after that. I would say that was a mugging.
Look, ROCCAT's on a 4-game winning streak. I take a 6-1 victory here. Things are coming up Millhouse. That's I'm going to roll with it while I can.
Yeah, but you know what? You guys come back tomorrow.
Yes.
For the North American LCS podcast. You can find that at Rough Drafts Podcast on the Twitters. You can find it on Esports Rough Drafts on the SoundCloud. It'll all go up there. You can follow me at Ceades_LOL. Chase.
First of all, just to clarify, that's at Rough Drafts Pod, not podcast.
Yeah,
on the Twitter. Pod. You can find me at RedShirtKing. I'd love to hear from you guys. There should be, by the time you're listening to this, my LCS power rankings over at LCS Predict should be up. And by the way, I wrote for unicorn.com last week. Nice to be back doing things with those guys. I've got another article coming out this week, but last week I wrote a piece on the road to the NALCS playoffs. A lot of what I said back then are still valid now, so definitely give that a look. We'll put it in the video description, probably on the NA pod since it'll be more relevant there, but you can find it at unicorn.com. A lot of great articles over there. Definitely check it out. It's fun to get back to writing more frequently. So absolutely, let's see if we can keep the momentum going on our NA pod, Walter.
But you know what? None of what you said matters because TSM is number 1. Until tomorrow, goodbye, Internet. Hey there, Ceades here. Thanks for checking out the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/roughdraftspod. For just $1 a month, you can join your fellow listeners in our patron-only Discord channel and help keep the content coming Or join our VIP club, where $1 a show or $8 a month gets you first priority on all patron content, like our patron-only Q&As. And check us out on all of our social media: Twitter @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, as well as on iTunes and YouTube by just searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.